Today we're going to solve linear systems by elimination, but we're going to deal with questions that have decimals and fractions. Here we have linear equations, and notice that they're all in decimals. So this might scare you a bit, but don't worry, we actually have a way of making this easy. So now let's get to it. Okay, so what you're going to do, you're going to multiply the first equation by 10 and the second equation also by 10. That will actually get rid of the decimals. So I'm going to start off with the first equation and multiply that all by 10. So equation number 1, 0.2x times 10 is 2x. Now negative 0.3y times 10 is negative 3y. And then negative 0.1 times 10 is negative 1. Isn't that much better? Okay, moving on to the second equation. So let's multiply that all by 10. So equation number 2, 0.5x times 10 is 5x. Negative 0.4y times 10 is negative 4y. And 0.8 times 10 is just 8. Okay, this is something we can work with. So now your step number 1, you are going to eliminate a variable. Notice none of the coefficients are the same, so just choose any. In this case, I'm going to choose to eliminate the x. So let's write that down. Now, if I were to take this 2x and multiply by 5, that would make it into 10x. So to make the 5 into 10x, I would have to multiply that by 2. And that's how I would get my 10x. So both would have the same coefficient and the same variable. So let's start multiplying this out. So I'm going to multiply the first equation by 5. And then the second equation, I'm going to multiply that by 2. So let's do the first equation and multiply that by 5. So I'm going to change that into equation 3 because now we've got different numbers. So 2x times 5, well, that comes to 10x. Then negative 3y times 5 is negative 15y. And then negative 1 times 5, well, that comes to negative 5. Okay, moving on to the second equation. So let's multiply that all by 2. So 5x times 2 is 10x, negative 4y times 2 is negative 8y, and 8 times 2 is 16. Okay, now to get rid of the 10x, we would actually have to subtract the equation. So let's put that there. So that would be our step number 2. We're actually going to subtract both equations to get rid of the variable. Now 10x minus 10x, that's 0, so moving on. Negative 15y minus negative 8y is negative 7y. And negative 5 minus 16, well, that comes to negative 21. Now let's get rid of the negative 7, divide both sides by negative 7, and our y is equal to positive 3. So this right here is your y value for the point of intersection. So moving on to step number 3. We are going to sub in the y is equal to 3 into either equation 1 or 2. I will not use the equations with the decimals because, well, why make things tough? So I'm going to actually choose equation number 1, okay, because I feel like the numbers are easier to work with. So let's write that down. Equation number 1 is 2x minus 3y is equal to negative 1. But now every time I see y, I'm going to sub in a 3 because that's what my y is actually equal to. So leave the 2x as it is, minus 3, and in brackets, I'm going to put 3 for y. Close the bracket is equal to negative 1. Now leave the 2x, and negative 3 times 3 is negative 9, is equal to negative 1. So I'm actually going to move over the negative 9 to the other side. So again, leave the 2x equals negative 1, and the negative 9 becomes positive 9. So really, 2x is equal to positive 8. And let's get rid of the 2 by dividing both sides by 2. So our x is actually equal to 4. So this right here is our x value for the point of intersection. Now that we have the x and y value, let's write the actual answer. So therefore, the solution is brackets, write the x value first, which is 4, comma, and the y value 3. And that right there is your final answer. Let's start off by labeling the lines. So this is line number 1, and this right here is line number 2. Ooh, yikes, we've got fractions, so let's try to get rid of that to make it easy. So focusing on the first equation, we want to get rid of the denominator 3 and 4. To do that, you have to find the lowest common multiple between 3 and 4, which happens to be 12. So now you're going to multiply the whole equation by 12 to get rid of the denominators. So let's multiply this by 12, the second term also by 12, and the third one by 12. Now remember, when you're multiplying with fractions, let's actually try to cancel any numbers, just to make the number smaller. So 12 goes into 3 4 times, that's canceled. And here 12 divided by 4, well, that comes to 3. And the 2 and 12 we can't cancel. Now I'm going to convert the first equation into equation number 3, without the fractions. So let's look at the numerator of the first fraction. So we've got that 4, so 4 times x, well, that equals 4x. All right, moving on to the second one. Now that 3 times y, well, 3 times y is just positive 3y. And then the other part, 2 times 12, well, that's just 24. So this looks way better than the fraction equation. Okay, so let's move on to equation 2. We want to get rid of the denominator 3 and 2. So same thing as before, find the lowest common multiple between 3 and 2. And that would happen to be 6. So we're going to multiply that whole equation by 6. Okay, so let's start off with the first term. We're going to multiply that by 6, the second one by 6, and the third one by 6. Now remember, when you're multiplying with fractions, always try to cancel so we have smaller numbers. So 6 divided by 3, well, that equals 2. Okay, that's canceled. And then 6 over here divided by 2, well, that comes to 3. And the 0, 6 we can't cancel. Now let's rewrite this equation into equation number 4. Again, let's look at the numerators of the first fraction. So the 2 times 2x, well, that comes to 4x. And the next one, 3 times negative y, well, that comes to negative 3y. And the 0 times 6, that's just 0. Now this looks way better. And we've actually got same coefficients. So let's now eliminate a variable. Now choose any. I'm just going to choose to eliminate the y. So to get rid of the 4x's, I would actually have to subtract them to make it into 0. So step number 2, subtract both the equations. So 4x minus 4x, well, that's 0. So let's move on to the next one. 3y minus negative 3y comes to positive 6y. And again, I'm just putting this sideways so you can see how I got my answer. So remember, when you've got two negatives, that actually turns to a positive. So really, this is 3y plus 3y, which is why my answer was 6y. Okay, let's get back to the equation. So now 24 minus 0, well, that just comes to 24. Now let's get rid of the 6 attached to the y, divide both sides by 6. So your y is actually equal to 4. And this right here is your y value for the point of intersection. Now let's find the x value by doing step number 3. We're going to sub y is equal to 4 into equation 3 or 4. Okay, not the fraction equations, only equation 3 and 4. And I'm just going to choose to do it to equation 4. So let's write equation 4, which is 4x minus 3y is equal to 0. Now, every time I see y, I'm going to sub in a 4 instead. So let's just write this as 4x minus 3. And in brackets, instead of y, I'm going to write 4 is equal to 0. Okay, 4x again. And negative 3 times 4 is negative 12 is equal to 0. Now I'm going to move the negative 12 to the other side. So leave the 4x, and that's equal to, well, positive 12. And let's get rid of the 4, divide both sides by 4. So your x is actually equal to 3. And this right here is your x value for point of intersection. Now that we have the x and the y value, let's write the solution. So therefore, the solution is 3, 4, close the bracket. And right there is your final answer.